Imagine waking up one morning and being told that your country, with its 2,500 years of history, its poetry read by kings, its carpets woven into the floors of European palaces, no longer exists. Not because it was conquered, not because it collapsed, but because someone signed a piece of paper. That is, more or less, what happened in 1935. In a single diplomatic circular sent quietly to foreign embassies around the world, Reza Shah Pahlavi requested that the international community stop using the name Persia and begin using Iran instead. 24 hours. That is all it took to rename one of the oldest continuous civilizations on Earth. Now here is the question that should unsettle you. Why would anyone do that? Think about what was being abandoned. Persian carpets, Persian poetry, Rumi, Hafez, Omar Khayyam, Persian cats, Persian architecture. The word Persia carried with it a cultural weight that modern branding agencies would pay billions to manufacture. And yet, it was replaced deliberately, strategically, by a name most Westerners had never even heard. This was not the whim of a king drunk on modernist ambition. This was the result of forces that had been compressing for millennia. Geography, demography, religion, economics, and the brutal mathematics of colonial power. To understand why Persia became Iran, you have to go back, much further back than 1935. Before there were Persians, before there were Iranians, before there were empires, there was the plateau. The Iranian Plateau stretches across approximately 1.6 million square kilometers. To put that into perspective, it is larger than Western Europe. But unlike Western Europe, roughly 70% of this land is defined by extremes. Jagged mountain ranges, salt deserts that stretch for hundreds of kilometers, and basins so isolated that communities living within them could go generations without meaningful contact with one another. This geography did something unusual. It did not simply separate people, it forged them, because survival on the plateau demanded cooperation. The mountains that isolated tribes also protected them from the great conquering armies of the ancient world. The deserts that made agriculture difficult also made invasion punishingly expensive. And sitting directly in the middle of the ancient Eurasian landmass, right at the crossroads between Mesopotamia, Central Asia, India, and the Mediterranean, whoever controlled this plateau controlled the arteries of global commerce. Historians estimate that at the height of the Silk Road era, controlling the Iranian plateau meant exerting influence over roughly 60% of ancient Eurasian trade flow. This was not just a country. This was a gravitational center of the ancient world. And it was to this plateau, around the 2nd millennium BC, that a group of nomadic peoples began to migrate. They spoke languages from the Indo-European family languages, distantly related to what would later become Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and eventually Portuguese and Spanish. They had nothing linguistically in common with Arabic, a confusion that persists to this day. In Old Persian, the word for mother was matar, the same root that gives us mater in Latin. Their word for father was pitar, identical in origin to pater. These were not Arab peoples. They were something older, something distinct, and they called themselves by a name that would define the next 3,000 years of history. They called themselves the Aryans, Arya in their language, and this land they called Airyanem Vaejah, the cradle of the Aryan peoples. If you're enjoying this deep geopolitical journey so far, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more untold stories hidden behind the world's most fascinating civilizations. By around 1000 BC, the Indo-Iranian migration had crystallized into distinct tribal groups across the plateau. Among them, two rose to particular prominence. The Medes settled in the northwest, organized, militarily capable, and quick to establish dominance over neighboring peoples. The Persians, or more precisely, the Parsua, settled further south, in a fertile region that would eventually be called Pars, or Fars. From that provincial name, one region among many, the entire Western world would derive its name for the civilization. Think about that for a moment. Persia, the name that conjured empires, that filled Greek historians with awe, that appeared on medieval maps as a byword for wealth and power, was, at its origin, simply a regional label. The equivalent of calling all of France Normandy because the Normans happened to be the group that European outsiders encountered first. It was the Greeks who made the name universal. When the armies of Cyrus the Great began their extraordinary expansion in the 6th century BC, the Greeks encountered them first through the Pars region. And so, for Greek historians, Herodotus, Thucydides, this entire civilization became Persia. The name stuck. It traveled west, embedded itself into Latin, into Arabic, into the vocabularies of every language that followed in the wake of classical civilization. Meanwhile, the people themselves had a different name for their world. Under Darius I, one of the most capable administrators in human history, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from the banks of the Indus River to the shores of the Aegean Sea, from Egypt to Central Asia. At its height, it encompassed an estimated 44% of the world's population. No empire before or since has ever governed a higher proportion of all living human beings. The empire was divided into 20 satrapies, semi-autonomous provinces governed through a sophisticated system of local administration. A 2,500-kilometer royal road, maintained by relay stations every 25 kilometers, allowed messages to travel from Sardis to Susa in just 7 days. Darius introduced the gold daric, the ancient world's first standardized currency. This was not a conquest state. It was a system, and critically, it was not built on assimilation. The Achaemenid model of governance, what historians sometimes call Pax Persica, was built on coexistence. Local languages were preserved. Local religious practices were tolerated. Cyrus famously freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity and helped rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. The Persians did not demand that conquered peoples become Persian. They simply demanded loyalty, taxes, and soldiers. This philosophical foundation, the idea that empire and diversity could coexist, would prove to be the civilization's greatest strength, and in time, its most powerful survival mechanism. In 334 BC, a young Macedonian king crossed the Hellespont with an army and a mission: to humiliate the Persian Empire in the name of Greece. Alexander's campaigns against Persia at Granicus, at Issus, and decisively at Gaugamela dismantled the Achaemenid state in less than a decade. The empire that had governed half the world collapsed with shocking speed. But what Alexander did next revealed something profound about the civilization he had just conquered. He did not destroy it. He was absorbed by it. Alexander adopted Persian court dress. He married Persian princesses. He retained Persian administrators in their positions, governing through existing bureaucratic structures rather than replacing them. He visited Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid world, and while part of it burned under disputed circumstances, he positioned himself explicitly as the legitimate successor to the Achaemenid kings. The conqueror had become a Persian monarch. This pattern invasion, followed by cultural absorption, would repeat itself throughout Persian history with remarkable consistency. When the Parthians replaced the fragmented successors of Alexander, they governed a Persian-flavored empire. When the Sassanids rose in 224 AD, They explicitly positioned themselves as the restorers of the Achaemenid tradition. Persian identity was not brittle. It was elastic. It bent under pressure and returned. Then came the 7th century AD, and the challenge that would prove the most profound of all. Arab armies from the Arabian Peninsula, electrified by the new faith of Islam, swept north and east with extraordinary speed. Within 2 decades, the Sassanid Empire, ancient, sophisticated, and seemingly immovable, was defeated. A new religion arrived. A new administrative language followed. And for many observers at the time, it must have seemed like Persian civilization was finally finished. It was not. The conversion of Iran from Zoroastrianism to Islam was not an event. It was a process, slow, uneven, and driven as much by economic incentive as by spiritual conviction. Under Arab rule, non-Muslims were subject to the jizya, a tax levied specifically on religious minorities. In a society already stressed by conquest and administrative disruption, this created a clear material incentive for conversion. But conversion did not happen overnight. Historians estimate it took nearly 3 centuries from the mid-7th to the late 9th century for roughly 80% of the population of Iran to transition to Islam. The old faith did not disappear instantly, it receded. And something interesting happened in the space that opened up. The Persian language, banned initially from official use in favor of Arabic, reasserted itself. In the 9th and 10th centuries, a new form of Persian emerged, written in the Arabic script but unmistakably Persian in structure and sensibility. The poets who wrote in this language, Ferdowsi, Rumi, Hafez, were not writing Arabic literature in translation. They were writing something distinct, something that carried the memory of the plateau, the mountains, the old empire into a new religious context. The civilization bent, again, and returned. The decisive moment in the religious transformation came in 1501 with the rise of the Safavid dynasty. Shah Ismail I, the founder of this new Persian empire, made a decision that would define Iranian identity for the next 5 centuries. He declared 12 Shia Islam the official state religion. This was not primarily a theological statement. It was a geopolitical strategy of breathtaking clarity. To the west, the Ottoman Empire, the dominant Sunni power of the age, represented an existential threat. By institutionalizing Shia Islam, the Safavids created a permanent ideological boundary between Iran and its neighbors. You could not simply absorb Iran into a Sunni empire. The population would resist at a religious level, not just a political one. The Safavids also did something else. They began systematically reviving the language of Persian identity, not Persia as the Greeks had named it, but Iran, the ancient term derived from Airyanem, meaning land of the Aryans. While foreigners continued to call the land Persia, its own people were increasingly identifying themselves as Iranians. The distinction was not yet political, but it was present. It was growing. By the early 20th century, the ancient civilization that had absorbed Greeks, Arabs, Mongols, and Turks faced a different kind of threat, one that came not with swords, but with contracts. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, founded in 1909, controlled 100% of Iran's oil production. British and Russian spheres of influence effectively divided the country into zones of foreign domination. The literacy rate stood above 90% illiterate. The infrastructure was crumbling. The name Persia, in the diplomatic language of the colonial era, had become associated with weakness, with a sick man of the East, an ancient but enfeebled state, ripe for exploitation. Reza Shah Pahlavi, who had seized power in 1921 and declared himself Shah in 1925, was determined to break this image by force of will. He built railroads, he modernized the army, he established universities, he banned the veil and traditional dress in public. He was authoritarian, often brutal, and completely focused on a single objective: transforming how the world and how his own people perceived this nation. In March of 1935, he sent a diplomatic circular to foreign embassies around the world. The request was simple. Going forward, the country was to be referred to as Iran, not Persia. The decision served three precise objectives simultaneously. Politically, it was a declaration of sovereignty. Persia carried the weight of colonial treaties, of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company's name, of a dozen humiliating agreements signed under duress. Iran carried none of that baggage. It was new. It was sovereign. Demographically, it was a unifying gesture. The population of the country was not and had never been ethnically homogeneous. Azeris, Kurds, Lurs, Baloch, Arabs, Armenians all lived within the same borders. Calling the country Persia privileged one ethnic group, the Pars, over all others. Iran, derived from the ancient term encompassing all peoples of the plateau, offered a more inclusive national identity. Economically, it was a rebranding exercise of the highest order. Reza Shah wanted the world to see not a land of carpets and poetry, but a modern industrial nation capable of competing on the world stage. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Iranian intellectuals argued passionately that abandoning Persia severed a living connection to one of the world's great cultural traditions. And they were not entirely wrong. The name change created an identity split that persists to this day, one that you can measure, remarkably, in Google search data. Search Persian culture, and you find art, poetry, food, architecture. Search Iran news, and you find politics, nuclear negotiations, sanctions. Two identities, one country. So what is the answer to the question we began with? How did Persia become Iran? Geography created isolation, and from isolation, resilience. The Fortress Plateau forged peoples who could not be permanently crushed, because the mountains always sheltered what the invaders could not reach. Demographics created diversity, and from diversity, the need for a unifying identity that transcended any single tribe or province. Politics, across 2,500 years, created a recurring pattern: invasion, absorption, revival. Every conqueror who came to destroy Persia ended up becoming, in some measure, Persian. Religion transformed the civilization, but did not erase it. The Persian spirit survived the Arab conquest, survived the Mongol storm, survived 5 centuries of Ottoman pressure, precisely because it had learned to wear new forms without losing its essential character. And economics, the cold logic of oil, colonial power, and national survival, forced a final act of deliberate reinvention in 1935. The ancient name was set aside. The modern name was claimed. But here is what matters most. The country did not actually change. The mountains did not move. The poetry did not disappear. The language did not become Arabic. The people did not forget who they were. Persia is the soul, the accumulated weight of Cyrus and Hafez, and Zoroaster and Rumi, and every dynasty that rose and fell on that ancient plateau. Iran is the political body, the modern state scarred by colonialism, defined by revolution, navigating the 21st century, with the consciousness of a civilization that has already outlasted a dozen empires. To understand this country, truly understand it, you need both names. You need to hold them together, even when the world insists on separating them. Because the name changed in 1935, the civilization did not. If this video shifted something in how you think about Iran, about Persia, about identity and power, subscribe, turn on notifications. Because the next story we are telling is one that most history channels have never touched, and once you see it, you will not be able to look at the modern world the same way.